Our topic today is how to be helpful, how to be of help. I want to give it away. I want to give away the ending. You know, when you're reading a book and it's like choose your own adventure and you go right to the back? That's what I used to do because I didn't want the work of the middle part of like trying to get to the end. And so the end is I can't be something to someone else if I'm not it myself, if I haven't received it. So basically, if I haven't been helped, it's hard for me to be of help. I have this experience in my early recovery of, having been helped, having been to a treatment center or two, and then finally, like having this experience, a spiritual experience that kind of changed everything in here, changed my heart, changed here and here. And I wanted to be of help. And part of that was I was having trouble in the problem of my addiction to stay abstinent, and I got to the point where there was no way that I wanted to turn back. I knew where that would all end, and it was a miserable hell. Coming from a place of not being able to die and definitely not being able to live properly, I just couldn't afford to go backwards into that problem. And so part of that was to change what I was doing. And I had a Bible verse stand out to me one day about seek ye first the kingdom of God, and then all these things will be added unto you. So basically, I put that principle into practice in my own personal life of how do I be helpful where God is and do God's work, and then He'll give me all these things. So I kind of went from my trade into 18 years of addiction services, mental health services, and now church planting. So that's kind of where I started. I received help, and out of that, I became more helpful than I was, because addiction is really all about consuming, and then recovery, I would say, should be about giving. That should be one of my driving principles. And so we see being helpful in so many ways. I can be helpful at home. I can be helpful by making dinner or doing the dishes or sweeping the floor. There's so many ways to be helpful. If you've ever done street outreach and gone out on the street and just seeing the people that you come across, maybe 20, 40, 50 people that you hand out sandwiches and granola bars for, and that is being helpful. Pace setting or being a sponsor, that's of amazing help. I just came back from the Great White North. Although it's pretty white here, I thought I was going into a land that would be super foreign weather-wise, but it was basically the same as Ottawa. It was cold, it was snowy, it was dark in the late afternoon, and it stayed dark but it was about the same as Ottawa climate, I would say, a little drier. That's what they all say. And we went there because of an organization that I went with. Their main job is to be helpful in the addiction recovery, mental health, and suicide prevention. So one of the tools that they've adopted nationally is the LifeLab processes, the diagnostic and the express, moving into that. So they're looking for places to be able to kind of launch this and get it off the ground. So they have a contact that does volunteer work for them in Iqaluit in the prison system. And so I was invited, they were invited, they did a field trip basically as a scouting mission. And the leader of it just said, we are going there to look and to hear, to see and to listen. And we have nothing to offer. We don't know what they need. We don't know how to be helpful. And that's how we can help. And it was a great reminder that we don't have all the solutions. Like, I learned more out of not trying to implement things and tools than I would have just naturally just listening and seeing. And it was just it was hard for me because I'm a little bit of a builder and an implementer. And maybe at the core of my manhood, I just want to fix things. And I think I'm really good with fixing things. And there's a problem with the kombucha labeler. Hey, man, I'll fix that problem. And so I think that's kind of where I default. And so it was really interesting to just go and hear and listen and learn if we can and how we could be of help, if that's even a possibility. So it was an amazing trip of really just learning and growing. And so when we look at the core of addiction as the spiritual problem, the spiritual issue that we all have, we're born into and apart from God into this world. And basically we are agents of fear. And so recovery is recovering that conscious contact with God as the spiritual issue that we have manifests itself. We call those the bedevilments on page 52 of the big book. One of those things is I can't be of real help. So that means I can be helpful, but typically all of my help has been really for my own gain. That could be relationally, that could be in all of the activities that I do. I can come across as helpful, but I'm really taking. I'm really like, if you didn't have anything to offer, I probably wouldn't be very helpful. It was all motive based. And at the end of the day, it was, what could I get out of this scenario or this situation? And so it talks about in the book, in the big book, it talks about what a person, what a man or a woman, what we should be looking for in them, because they are going on the theory that you can't recover from addiction on your own. So then you're looking for a partner to help you. And one of those is that they have a real answer, that they have real help for you. They have a real solution. So the concept is that they have the real solution and that they have real answers for you. And they're not just going to, catch fish for you. They're actually going to be able to teach you how to fish, how to eat, how to be sustainable. One of the guys that we read about in the big book, he failed. He kept failing at the problem, and so he kept relapsing over and over and over again. And he would have clean time here, and he'd have clean time there. And ultimately, they said that because of at the nature of addiction, it's a spiritual problem. They said that he failed to enlarge and perfect his spiritual life. And so it's just like fishing. When I learned to fish, I did it for hours and hours, and maybe a little too obsessively. I had a rowboat and I had time, and I was young and it was summer, and I rowboated everywhere, and I caught very little fish. But one day I was rowing back to the shore with my brother. This was a little canoe, and I was just dangling my lure. I still remember the lure. It was a Mepps minnow. It was orange and a little fat body. And we were just we were coming home and we're just trolling. And I think it was hitting the sand. It was like there was no real fish. No fish should have been there. And then we caught a snag. And I was like, we caught a snag. We got to stop rowing. And as I'm pulling this snag up, I think it's like a piece of wood. It's like seaweed. I'm like pulling and pulling. And then I see a fin. And it was a pike. So it wasn't fighting. It was just pulling and pulling straight down. And then the screams and the yells and the like paddle to the shore because I can't even get this. It was a 13-pound northern pike. And I put the time in and the energy in, and that's what we call perfecting, enlarging my fishing life, but my spiritual life. That's what I have to do on a spiritual basis. And the spiritual life involves having a relationship with God, and God will solve the drink and my addiction problems. And so on page 67 of the big book, it talks about really having been helped, having been shown how to fish, how to be sustainable for the rest of your life, how to come into this relationship with God that will solve all of my problems. Now, part of my mission is to be helpful to others. And so what does it mean to be of real help? What does it mean to be helpful in a general sense? We kind of see the process of recovery where we're going through the just the general inside cleaning. We call that inventory. And it says we avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. So basically, the idea is like I've seen all of this stuff in myself. I've hurt people. I've used people. I've taken advantage of people, and it's all fear based. And now God's perfect love casts out that fear. So now I can see the people around me that they've been disconnected from God, just like I have been. We do not, if we do, we wouldn't want to treat sick people that way. If we do, we will destroy our chance of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly, tolerant view of each and every person. So part of fishing isn't scaring the fish away, isn't going right at them. There's more to this to be helpful. And so what they're talking about in this context is how do I actually be of real help? How do I actually start to help other people around me have this problem inside of them, this spiritual problem? It might manifest itself in different ways, whether it's pornography or alcoholism or drug addiction or codependency, food addiction, fill in the blank. Those are just symptoms of the problem. But when I see people just like I was in addictive cycles due to this spiritual malady inside of them, how do I be helpful? Well, maybe it's not coming at them with the solution all the time. Here it's saying, actually, to be able to help somebody, I need to be loving and tolerant towards them at all times and treat them like a sick person. So when I go into the hospital and I see a sick person, I'm just, for the most part, I always want to bring treats. I'm that guy. I overdo it. I understand. Probably part of it is selfish because I want them to. But at the same time, I have learned to bring stuff, leave it at their bedside, try not to eat it because they don't even want it at that point. But I don't want to make it about me. And I just sit there with them. And that can be annoying and boring. And they, like I'm trying to make conversation, but I'm just being with them. So that's the idea of the first way to be helpful to somebody when you have a solution and you see unhealthy people around you disconnected from God. Sick people is what the big book calls it. I just say it's disconnected from God. How do I be helpful? Loving and tolerant would be the first step. So as we progress in this new solution, the problem has been solved. I have been helped, and now I get to be helpful. This is what our job is. This is what our book directs us to do. On page 102, and this might make you uncomfortable because maybe you have a job. Maybe you work 9 to 5. Maybe you work night shift, but you get paid to do a job. And imagine going to your employer and going like, excuse me, I have a new job. And this is what it entails. It says, your job now is to be at the place where you may be of maximum helpfulness to others. So never hesitate to go anywhere if you can be helpful. You should not hesitate to visit the most sordid spot on earth on such an errand, keeping on the firing line of life with these motives, and God will keep you unharmed. And so the motive is, how can I be helpful? So you don't have to quit your job today, but wherever you are you saying, how can I be helpful? How can I be of help? How could I be of real help? Because there's different levels of it. There's kind of the entry point of love and tolerance. There are people that are very hard to be around. I don't really know any of them, but it's true. There are people that are hard to be around. And I think the first measure of help is to be able to be friends with them, to be friendly with them. It doesn't mean that you have to, spend all this time with them, but when you're around them, you actually ask questions and you actually take a care to their lives and what they're doing. And when the opportunity comes available, then you can be of real help. And what I mean by real help is giving them the solution, the help that you have, kind of like fishing. Would you want to take the time to learn how to fish? And on page 77 of the big book, it says that our real purpose is to be of maximum benefit to God and those about us. So, how am I of being maximum benefit to those around us? And then I can reflect of like, there's two ways that I was reflecting on my trip was like, I have the solution and I want to be helpful. But implementation on that trip wasn't helpful or isn't helpful. And it's like the more that I learned, the less that I thought I had to offer. And just understanding the culture and the people and the hurt and the pain and the problem, the suicide rate is the highest rate in the world. Like, I don't understand that. Like, I don't even have a barometer to understand what they go through. And so if we're bringing real help, I think it can be destructive to start to implement. And maybe that's codependency. But then the other one is apathy of like, well, God doesn't, it's just going to happen. But the reality is, if I have the help that someone helped me with, and that's to have a relationship with God, then one of the metrics is probably a measurement of daily helpfulness. So that when I've had this relationship with God, I've had a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening, I see where I can be helpful. And so maybe that's a good metric for you today is just ask yourself, like, how am I helpful? Where have I been helpful? Am I trying to control and dominate others? Am I just trying to fix them, advice give to them? Because that's not helpful. Teaching somebody to fish is helpful when you have the opportunity. And so wherever you are, whether it's online, whether it's in an office, whether it's on the street, whether it's in the community, or whether it's at home, I believe when you have had this help, you have nothing left but inside of you to be helpful. So the metric is if I have help inside of me, if I have the solution in me, then I can be the solution pours out of me. And the reality is I can't keep I can't keep it if I don't give it away. Otherwise it gets stagnant and stale. So those are like the different ends of the helpfulness rainbow, maybe we could put it. So basically I have a couple questions. I'm going to open up the floor. Number one is how do you and can you help? How have you been of help? How do you help? Maybe there's some brainstormings on how you could be more helpful or where you could direct your energy. And then what gets in your way of helping? What does that look like in your personal life? And then maybe just trying to understand how you could be helpful or where you need to be helped yourself.